The day after my wife was buried, my daughter-in-law handed me a brochure for a nursing home. Not next week. Not next month. The day after we lowered Yvonne into the ground, I stood in my son's kitchen, staring at a glossy pamphlet covered in smiling elderly people and fake promises about independent living. For a moment, I honestly thought Savannah was joking. Then I looked at her face. She wasn't. "You'll like it there, Warren," she said. "The staff seems very attentive." My wife of 41 years had been gone less than 24 hours, and already she was trying to get rid of me. My son Terence sat at the table staring into his coffee. Silent. "That hurt more than anything," Savannah said. Terence wasn't weak. He wasn't cruel. But grief had hollowed him out. Ever since Yvonne's cancer diagnosis 2 years earlier, he'd been operating on emotional fumes. Savannah knew it, and she used it. I slowly placed the brochure back on the counter. "I'm not moving into a nursing home." Savannah crossed her arms. "You can't stay in that house alone forever. I've managed quite well for 72 years. This isn't about managing." "No," I replied quietly, "it isn't." The room fell silent. For a second, I thought Terence might finally speak. Instead, he lowered his eyes. That was when I realized something had changed while Yvonne was dying. Something dangerous. I left 10 minutes later. No argument, no scene, just disappointment sitting heavy in my chest. When I pulled into my driveway, a black SUV was waiting outside. A large man stepped out before I could park. Victor Moreno, the closest thing I had to family outside of blood. Former military, former private investigator, and one of the few people Yvonne trusted completely. "Warren." "Victor." He studied my face. "That bad?" "Worse." He nodded as though he'd expected the answer. Then he handed me a small key. Bronze. Old. Worn smooth by time. My stomach tightened. I recognized it immediately. Yvonne's warehouse key. The one she'd kept hidden in her jewelry box for nearly 20 years. "What is this?" Victor looked toward the house. "Your wife left instructions." My pulse quickened. "What instructions?" "She said if anything happened to her, I was to wait until after the funeral." I stared at him. "Then what?" Victor's expression darkened. "Then I was supposed to take you to the warehouse." 30 minutes later, we were driving across the industrial side of town. Neither of us spoke much. The warehouse sat near the edge of an abandoned shipping district. From the outside, it looked forgotten. Dusty windows, rusting steel, faded paint. Nothing about it suggested what waited inside. Victor unlocked the door. The lights flickered on. And I stopped breathing. The entire warehouse had been transformed into an investigation center. Walls covered in photographs, financial records, timelines, corporate documents, surveillance images, hundreds of files, thousands of pages. Every inch of the room documented one person. Savannah, my daughter-in-law. At the center of the room stood a television. Beside it sat a small envelope with my name written in Yvonne's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a flash drive. Victor quietly inserted it into the television. The screen flickered. Then Yvonne appeared. Thin, weak, clearly fighting pain, but smiling. Always smiling. "Hello, my love." The moment I heard her voice, my knees nearly gave out. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone." I swallowed hard. "I know you're confused." She glanced toward the camera. Then her expression changed, became serious. "Determined. For 2 years while you were taking care of me, I've been investigating Savannah." Every muscle in my body froze. And then Yvonne said the words that changed everything. "Warren, Savannah is not who Terence thinks she is." I watched Yvonne's recording 3 times that night. Each viewing hurt more than the last. Not because she was gone. Because she had spent her final months preparing for a war she knew was coming. While I was focused on doctors, treatments, and making her comfortable, she had been building a case against my own daughter-in-law. The screen flickered as the recording continued. "I needed you to focus on loving me," Yvonne said softly. "Not on this." Tears blurred my vision. Then her tone changed. "Terence is in danger." That got my attention immediately. "Not physical danger," she continued. "Something worse." Victor handed me a folder. Inside were financial records, corporate filings, property transfers, loan agreements. Everything pointed to one person, Savannah. For years, she'd been quietly gaining control over every major decision in Terrence's life. Bank accounts, investments, business interests, even legal documents. The deeper I looked, the uglier it became. She wasn't helping him manage things. She was positioning herself to own them. And Terrence had no idea. The next morning, I did exactly what Yvonne instructed. Nothing. I didn't confront Savannah. I didn't warn Terrence. I didn't reveal what I'd found. Instead, I became exactly what Savannah expected me to be. An old man falling apart after losing his wife. For 2 weeks, I played the role perfectly. I forgot appointments, repeated questions, acted confused, even mixed up names occasionally. Every performance was deliberate. Every mistake was calculated. And Savannah noticed. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to Terrence in the kitchen. "Your father isn't doing well." I smiled from behind the hallway wall. Hookset. Terrence sounded worried. "What do you mean?" "He seems confused lately." "He's grieving." "Maybe." Her pause said everything. "But maybe it's more than grief." I heard silence. Then Savannah delivered the line she'd probably been planning for months. "We may need to start discussing long-term care." There it was. The nursing home wasn't the goal. It was step one. If she could convince Terrence that I was mentally declining, she could remove me from the board entirely. Exactly as Yvonne predicted. If you've ever watched someone pretend to care while quietly planning your downfall, subscribe, because some betrayals are too important to ignore. Over the next month, Savannah grew bolder. She started requesting access to documents that had nothing to do with her. She asked questions about trusts, property titles, insurance policies, retirement accounts, always casually, always with a smile. But now I knew what I was looking at. Predators always get impatient when they think they're winning. Then Victor uncovered something even bigger. One evening, he arrived at the warehouse carrying a thin black folder. His expression told me I wasn't going to like what was inside. Preston Hall. I opened the folder. The name meant nothing to me. At first, then I saw the photographs. Preston wasn't a lawyer, wasn't an accountant, wasn't a financial advisor. He was a venture capitalist, the kind who specialized in acquiring struggling businesses and stripping them apart. The photos showed him meeting Savannah repeatedly over the previous 18 months. Restaurants, hotels, private clubs, far too many meetings to be accidental. "What does he want?" I asked. Victor slid another document across the table. This time my stomach dropped. Terrence's company, my son's engineering company. The business he'd spent nearly 15 years building from nothing. Preston had been quietly acquiring debt connected to it. Not enough to take control. Not yet, but enough to apply pressure. Suddenly the entire picture became clearer. Savannah wasn't acting alone. She never had been. This wasn't about inheriting a house or moving me into a nursing home. It was about taking everything. Then came the worst discovery of all. Hidden deep within the files was evidence that Terrence had recently developed a breakthrough industrial patent, a design worth millions if brought to market. And somehow Savannah and Preston had gained access to confidential information about it. I sat there staring at the documents. Fury burned through me, not because they were targeting me, because they were targeting my son. The same son who still believed Savannah loved him. The same son who would do anything for her. Victor broke the silence. "We need to move faster." I nodded. For the first time I agreed, because the timeline was changing. Savannah wasn't preparing. She was executing. And according to the newest surveillance reports, she was only 1 day away from making her biggest move yet. Tomorrow night, at a gala attended by investors, executives, and media, Savannah planned to publicly unveil Terrence's invention as her own success story, and standing beside her would be Preston Hall, smiling while they stole my son's future right in front of him. For the first time since Yvonne died, I stopped pretending to be weak, because tomorrow night the game would finally end. The gala ballroom was packed. Investors, executives, reporters, everyone Savannah wanted to impress. She stood on stage beside Preston Hall, smiling like she already owned the future. Terence sat in the front row looking proud. That was the hardest part. My son still had no idea he was being betrayed. Savannah stepped to the microphone. Tonight, we're excited to unveil a breakthrough innovation that will transform the industry. The giant screen behind her lit up. Terence's invention, Terence's work, Terence's dream. And Savannah was presenting it as if it belonged to her. That's when I stood up. Every head in the room turned. For a moment, Savannah froze. Then I saw it. Fear. Real fear. The kind that appears when someone realizes the person they thought was defeated has been watching the entire time. "Warren?" Terence asked. I walked toward the stage, slowly, calmly. "Before this presentation continues," I said, "I think everyone deserves to see the truth." The screen suddenly changed. Photographs, financial records, surveillance images, emails, transfer documents, one piece of evidence after another. The room fell silent. Savannah's face drained of color. Preston looked like he wanted to disappear. Then came Yvonne's final recording. Her voice echoed through the ballroom. "I spent 2 years collecting this evidence because I knew my family was in danger." The audience sat motionless. Terence stared at the screen in disbelief. Everything finally made sense. The manipulation, the lies, the stolen patent, the plan to take control of his company. By the time federal investigators entered the ballroom, nobody was surprised. Savannah didn't argue. Preston didn't run. They both knew the game was over. If you've ever watched someone underestimate a family that refuses to quit, subscribe, because some victories are earned through love, loyalty, and patience. Later that night, Terence and I sat together in silence. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he looked at me. "Mom knew." I nodded. "She knew." Tears filled his eyes. Mine too. Because this revenge was never about destroying Savannah. It was about protecting the family Yvonne spent her entire life building. And thanks to her, we finally did.